I don't know. As you were asking me the question, then I knew what you were getting to. I'd have to take a minute and tell you something that I think affected me more when it happened than anything else that I can recall. The after effect of that. As I mentioned, I was 11 when I got here, and I went to live with this family, and they were very good to me, especially the lady, and her husband was an insurance man. He was nice, but as I grew older, he was just a typical man, and I respected him for the fact that he was the husband of this woman. But he played cards 3 times a week, and sat in the Catskills in the summertime and rocked this chair. But she was one of these rare creatures that looked like a housewife, but she was a goddess to somebody. She was a wonderful, strong-willed, concerned person. Anyway, during the years that I was growing up in the Bronx with this family, it was wartime and the rationing, and my brother was the exact opposite of me. Very studious, very reserved, didn't play ball, very kind, very bright, very sensitive person. And I was in the streets and learning how to play ball and learning all about what the street life was about in the Bronx, learning about dice and cards and ladies and cars. But all the time that this was going on in the house, whenever I felt there was injustice, he got a bigger piece of meat, or she didn't yell at him because he was always clean, and I always came home with my pants torn and my knees scraped, or coming in late on the weekends. And I always had this feeling that it's because I'm not yours. If I were yours, you wouldn't give me the meat with the fat on it, or you would tolerate some things from Roy that you're not tolerating from me because I'm not your own son. And I understand that, and I carried this way through my teens. Anyway, Roy was drafted, and a couple of months later I was drafted. And forget about the Army, which is a whole story in itself. That at one point while I was in the service in Korea, a message came from the Red Cross that my mother had become ill, that the Red Cross had investigated the situation, and they felt that she wasn't ill enough to warrant my coming home on emergency leave. But they wanted to go on record as telling me that she was ill, but you can't leave the front. And there was nothing I could do. 5 days later, another message came, emergency leave granted, mother gravely ill, allowed to come home. So I left, I drove down to Daegu, to Chunshan, over to Tokyo on these, whatever. When you're in the Army, you can come home on emergency leave. You just take whatever plane you can. You have this little card, and I went from there to Wake Island, to Guam, to Honolulu. And all along the way, I couldn't get to a phone, and I never can get through. Finally, I got to Travis here, Air Force Base. And I called my house, and I said, Roy answered, I said, how is she? I didn't dawn on me that she wasn't good. She wasn't going to be well. She had intestinal problems. And he just said, she's gone. And I'd missed the funeral by a day. Anyway, I get to home, and I go to the house, and my brother's there with my foster father. My foster father's sitting in the living room with my brother. We're both in uniform. And my father's sitting there somewhat delirious, and he's saying things like, this wonderful woman, why did she have to go? It's so sad that she's done so much for 2 boys, not her own, took 2 children from the street, made a family. And I looked at my brother and just looked at me. He said, yes, we've never, for some reason, never told you that Roy was a doorstep baby. He's an American boy, but he was left somewhere. And they went to the hospital. My mother, I was told then, could never have children. And they had adopted him at birth in a hospital in the Bronx and raised him as their own, although he knew, he was told by them along the way. But for some inexplicable reason, they never told me, and it just came out there. I'm sitting looking at my brother and my father, and the thing that went through my head was all the dozens and dozens of times that I accused these people of siding with him, favoring him because he was theirs, and they just ate it. I mean, year in and year out, they just took all that shit that I spewed out, and wasn't very pleasant. I mean, I felt rather guilty. And I realized that this woman went before I ever had a shot of turning around and giving some back. That I wasn't bad to her while she was alive. But when the chips were down and she was up front with me, I just don't think I ever met her halfway.
Do you feel bad about that now?
No, I don't feel bad. No, I don't feel bad about it. I just wish that I wish that she got just a grain of the weight of the hits from me that I got from her. I mean, not just because she kept me going, she kept me alive and she fed me. She always talked to me about right and wrong. And she was a housewife, but she's one of these rare, she's like, I have a sister, one of my 4 sisters that lives here. Well, you meet her, and you know that she's just right. Not right about things, but she's just right about her approach to people. You come into her home is your home. My mother was that way. And afterwards I realized that when I came home, she may have been yelling and screaming at me, but then in afterthought, in retrospect, I realized that she may have yelled and screamed at me. Then all of a sudden she just grabbed my leg and cleaned it, or took my pants and sewed them, or went out and, because she read about a sale, and got me something. In spite of her being angry and bitter, well, later on I had to rebalance all my thoughts, because how many times I said to myself, she's only doing that because she has to give me something because I'm living in her house, and which such a misconstrued conception of who she was.